Hello everyone, Jai Hind and welcome to the platform of StudyIQ IS in English. My name is Bhanwar Singh, MXCD 115th course and qualified civil services in 2012. And I welcome you on the platform. So if you're live, please type in the message and let me know that you're watching this session live. And once again, we'll be doing the complete the Hindu analysis over here, where we'll be taking the Delhi edition and we'll be seeing which all important news are there in our today's newspaper that are important for our preparation for the civil services. All right, Naira ji, good morning. Who else is here? Please type in the message and let me know that you are watching this session live. All right. So let's say if you're live, please type in the message and let me know that you are watching this session live along with me. All right, so these are the important topics or the important news that we'll be discussing in today's session. The first one is that we'll be discussing is about the Supreme Court, which have said that the right to walk is basically a fundamental right. So again, this is very important because when it comes to Supreme Court, so there are lots of rights which had been, they had been made the fundamental rights through the inferment towards the Constitution of India, and ultimately that is one of the important things that we'll be discussing today. Then we'll be talking about the NEET UG and the Telegram ban, where the Delhi High Court, it has upheld the ban of the Telegram, and this relates to 69A section of the IT Act of 2000. Then we'll be talking about the census 2027 as well. Then we'll be talking about the next topics that we'll be discussing is the Young Lawyers Fund and Abhigyan application. Then we'll be talking about the three-language policy, where this relates to the issue that is there in Nagaland. All right, then we'll be talking about the glacial lake Glof as well. That is the outburst, when it comes to the flood. So that is what we'll be talking about. Then we'll be talking about MPC, that is the Monetary Policy Committee, and also the written regulation that had been passed by the European Union. That is also very important because it relates to the anti-migration policy that had been, they are there in the European Union. And Kundan, good morning. Now, over here, when it comes to the codes that you can use or utilize for your, preparation for the mains examination. So these are the codes. The first one is by the Supreme Court of India related to the right to walk. And it is, if a road exists, there must be a duty to ensure a footpath is demarcated and maintained. And then the second one is by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, which says the Constitution is not a mere lawyer's document. It is a vehicle of life, and its spirit is always the spirit of the age. Now, both the codes, you can use it while you are drafting the answer for your governance or the polity framework, or the questions that are related to governance or polity. Now, coming to the first news that we have, it is about walking or walking on footpath is a fundamental rights. That is what had been said by Supreme Court. And there is an editorial as well that is that India needs to build more footpaths to help pedestrians walk freely. Now, when it comes to the issue, you must know that, ultimately, there are nearly about more than 35,000 deaths that occurs in India because of the issue. Good morning, Apex. Over here, it is very important that the Supreme Court have declared, or it has said that the walking on the demarcated footpaths, it is a fundamental right that is granted under Article 19 that provides us with lots of freedom. All right. It also, when it comes to the complete issue, it has arisen after the death of 5-year-old boy who was, walking to his school with the along with the parent, that is the father, and he was crushed by the truck. At the same time, the family had been awarded 11 lakh rupees compensation, and the duty bearers, they are now legally identified for the right to walk on the pedestrian or the demarcated footpaths which are there. At the same time, the Supreme Court said that when it comes to the roads, so there are motorized vehicles, and that privilege, it cannot override the pedestrian's right to walk on the footpath that is there. Now, this relates to Article 19(1)(d). Now, Article 19(1)(d), it provides for the freedom to, or the right to move freely throughout the territory of India, and thereby it relates directly to Article 19(1)(d) that will also now include the right to walk on the footpath as well. There is the Motor Vehicle Act that was passed in 1988, and over here this is very important that it never recognized the pedestrian rights as well as when it comes to the parallel, you can draw the parallel that whenever there is the right, all right, whenever we are providing with the right, there has to be a kind of infrastructure that has to be maintained and built before guaranteeing any rights. Shinobi, good morning. So over here, it is very important that you can lay down the parallel with the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or the Street Vendors Act of 2014 as well. Now, when it comes to urbanization, so when it comes to the urbanization that we are seeing, it has relegated the walking to the inconvenience, and that was what was observed by the Supreme Court. Now, it is very important that the Supreme Court have laid down the duty bearer framework as well, where the municipalities, they must build the footpaths for the right to walk, as well as it has proposed that there should be a new regulatory body for the enforcement, and there are reasonable restrictions that will apply here also, because we know when it comes to the fundamental rights, they are not absolute except for the one fundamental right, that is absolute right. So over here, it is very important to note that there would be the reasonable restrictions that could be applied for the right to walk as well. And the court have directed the Ministry of Housing, the Ministry of Road and the Rural Development as well to act and ultimately provide this right to walk to the citizens of India. Now over here, it is very important to note that when it comes to the complete issue, so this is the test of the urban local body accountability, that how they will provide with the footpaths and ultimately that will lay down the framework for the right to walk that has been provided by the Supreme Court. Also, there is the infrastructure investment that is required for building the footpaths that is required for the right to walk. Also, there is the rate of investment or return of the investment when it comes to the productivity that has to be seen, because ultimately that is the one of the perspective through which the economic lens, that all the policies they are seen. All right, as well as it raises a very important question, that is the elitism of the motorized transportation that is there as compared to the poor, which are basically using the walk, or they are the pedestrian poor. So this also raises an important social question in front of us. And also it is about the state's minimum duty that is towards the citizen to provide them with the right to walk and to walk safely and securely. That is also that it raises the ethical dimension as well. So this is the first important thing that you can see in our today's newspaper. Now, if you are appearing for 2026 mains examination, so there could be a question that could be asked, that is the Supreme Court's declaration of walking as fundamental right reflects both constitutional evolution and the urban governance failure. Over here, you could be asked to comment about it. Hello, Kosa, good morning. All right. So over here, you can start with the introduction where you can relay on the fact and the data. That is where we have seen that on 20th of June, it was the Supreme Court have held that the freedom to walk on the demarcated footpath, it is a fundamental right under Article 19(1) A, B, C and D as well. It is the first such explicit judicial declaration that had been made by the Supreme Court. Then you can talk about the constitutional dimension where the Supreme Court have expanded the scope of Article 19, that is beyond the literal movement, to include the expressional, congregational and the associational dimensions of walking. Now, the Motor Vehicles Act of 1988 had long ignored the pedestrian rights, and the court have called that there should be a statutory framework and a dedicated regulatory body that you can include. All right. At the same time, when it comes to street vendors have started setting up their stalls on the footpath, how are people supposed to walk there? That is what I'm saying, that there has to be a statutory framework and even the dedicated regulatory body that the Supreme Court have said, and that had been laid down by the judgment as well. All right. Then when it comes to the governance failure, all right. So ultimately, you can talk about the urban local bodies. They have prioritized over the motorized infrastructure and the encroached footpaths that are there. Like you said, Kundan, that there had been encroached footpaths that are the problem through the parking on the vendors or the utilities as well. And there had been the ignorance of the right to walk or the duty towards walkers by the urban local bodies. As well as you can draw a parallel towards the Street Vendors Act, where the right exists on paper, but the implementation, it lags. And there is weak enforcement, that is the structural problem. And then you can conclude. You can conclude that the municipalities must treat the footpath construction as a justifiable duty, and there must be integration with the Smart Cities Mission, amending the Motor Vehicle Act of 1988 and establishing a full-time pedestrian rights regulator. That is the essential next step that should be there for guaranteeing the right to walk that had been given by the Supreme Court. So over here, this, when you are writing in this dimension, that covers everything, or it covers every aspect. So most of you have asked how to write the answer in the mains. So that is how you have to approach the answer writing. All right. Good morning, Isha. Now, coming to the next important news that we have, we know that it is all about Telegram. You are all, you have been asking, sir, how to send the PDF. So we know that ultimately the PDFs could be sent only from Monday onwards. Do not worry. All the PDFs that had been there, that we have conducted the sessions for, they will also be uploaded. Now, over here, yes, topics and solutions, both that is required. So your mains questions and their solutions are extremely helpful. Thank you, Kundan. All right, now over here we have the news that is about the Telegram. And over here you can see that the High Court have, laid down, and it has said that the ban on the Telegram is apt that had been done, or it had been relayed by the government of India. Now over here, we'll not discuss this in detail. We'll just discuss because we have already discussed this in the previous sessions. All right. Good morning, Ganesh. All right. Now over here, there is another important news that relates to the NEET, and it is that Supreme Court refuses urgent hearing on the plea to defer the NEET retest. And this is for the second time in this week. And there is also another news that is about the sad demise of the NEET aspirant in Indore. And there is a probe that is underway right now. So over here, the NEET UG exam, it was cancelled. The exam was held on 3rd of May, and it was cancelled later on because of the paper leakage. All right. And there is the CBI probe that had been launched, and ultimately the retest will be scheduled tomorrow. And this retest will be organized by the NTA itself. That is the regulatory body, or the body that is responsible for conduction of the test that is there. All right, now government have blocked the Telegram under the section 69A of the IT Act of 2000, and this is using the emergency provision, and Delhi High Court have said that the powers that had been used under Article 69A, they are right. All right, China demonstrates control, Nepal demonstrates resistance, and India seeks a middle path. What should be the ideal democratic model of social media governance in 21st century? So see, when it comes to the social media, Shinobi. So social media is basically about, the freedom. All right, this is where we are talking about democratic system. And ultimately over here, the social media, of course, any media that is there, not just social media, even the media platforms which are there, the news agencies which are there. Yes, there should be the reasonable restrictions that had been given under the Constitution of India for the right to speech and expression. All right. When it comes to the social media, or when it comes to the, even speaking in any format. All right. Whether it is your expression through the written language or it is through the spoken language, it is always must be balanced with the reasonable restrictions which are provided under the Constitution of India. That is what you have to remember. Mr. Shrini, good morning. And all right. All right. So over here, this is section 69A of the IT Act that empowers the government to block the online content and the platform. And Telegram have said over here that it is the complete application that had been blocked. But at the same time, the Delhi High Court have said that the application also runs on the computer program that is there. And ultimately, the government have the powers to block the complete access as well. Now, Section 69A of the IT Act is where the government blocks the public access to the computer resource, and High Court says that the information includes the software and the programs as well. And thereby the full platform block is valid that had been laid down by the High Court. And there is a proportionality test that is where the channel takedowns have failed, and ultimately they are the platform block that had been justified by the Delhi High Court. Now, over here, it is very important that CBI probe is right now, it is overgoing, and there is the parallel to the past Vyapam type of the exam scams that had happened. And Vyapan scam was there in Madhya Pradesh, if you do not know. Now, over here, it is very important that when it comes to the proportionality test, very important, you must remember this. When it comes to the proportionality test, that was to determine whether the state action is limiting the fundamental rights is justifiable or not. Now, this was the test that was comprehensively laid down in the Supreme Court case that was in Justice K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India case in 2018. And that was the Aadhaar case that I'm talking about. Now, there are the four things that the courts they take into mind. All right, the first thing is that there should be a legitimate goal. That is, the measure must pursue the lawful as well as the legitimate objective that should be there. Then there is the rational connection. That is, the measure must be rationally connected to achieving that objective that had been laid down by by the government. Then there is the necessity. That is, there must be no equally effective or less restrictive alternative that is available with the government when it is moving towards the ban. And there must be balancing as well, where the societal benefits of the measure, they must outweigh the infringement on the fundamental rights. And that is the proportionality test that we are talking about. So this is the landmark judgment that was there, which laid down that the government, it could limit the fundamental rights, but there has to be the proportionality test where it must pass through the four essentials to evaluate the complete state action that had been there. All right. Independent multi-stakeholder oversight, algorithmic transparency, and judicial due process. Right. Good morning, political science. All right. Now, coming to the next important news, this is where you will find this in the ground zero. And this is about the pressures of counting India. Now, this was the report that, or the allegations that we have studied even before as well. All right, and over here, this is that there is the phase 1 of the census 2027, where there had been house listing and housing operations, or HLO phase. Here, there had been nearly about 33 lakh of the enumerators, and the complete application had been developed, that is Census 2027 app, which is completely digital. Everything that is being done is fully digital, and ultimately originally that the census, it should have been in 2021, but it was deferred because of the COVID-19, and it is 6 years late that we are seeing right now. Now, there is the very important thing that you can see over here, the pressure that this report talks about. It is about the pressure of altering the data. Now, these enumerators, they have reported that there had been the pressure by the superiors to alter the data that is there for the sanitation, for the LPG, and for the water as well. And there had been also private school teachers, which had been, they have reached the Bombay High Court for not being included into their enumerators. Now, over here, it is very important to note that Census 2027 is the first fully digital census that we are seeing. And ultimately, there is CMMS portal that is through which the complete data enumeration is being done. Now, it is the first one to collect the caste data as well after 1931. The last caste census that had happened in country was in 1931, where it happened during the time of the Britishers. All right, good morning, Vikas. All right. All right, now over here, it is the first time that there had been the self-enumeration as well that was given to the residents, and there is the phase 2 that will be conducted later on after the phase 1, where there will be the population enumeration, and even the caste data will be collected over here. There is an honorarium that is being paid to the enumerators, and that is 25,000 rupees. Now, over here, it is very important that the complete caste or the census in India, it is conducted by the Registrar General and the Census Commissioner of India through the Census Act of 1948. Now, over here, the Section 8, Clause 2 is where they have to be legally bound to answer for any of the data that had been collected. And ultimately, Section 4A of the Census Act, it lays down the duty on the local authorities only and not on the private school teachers, which had been approached, or they have approached the Bombay High Court as well. Now here it is very important that there are the blocks which had been divided. The enumerators, they are covering the complete census through the HLB or house listing blocks, which have nearly about 150 to 180 of the households which are there. And there is the complete portal that had been launched for the complete management and monitoring, that is census management and monitoring system, that is CMMS. Yes. Now over here you can see that there had been certain issues which had been flagged. Now the issue is of the data integrity, where the supervisors are asking to change the sanitation or the LPG data. Also there is the digital divide that you can see, because when it comes to the rural divide, all right, so in the rural areas, we have 83.3% of the internet access, and there are the cases of the crashing of the application as well. There are the safety as well, whereas the FIRs had been lodged against the enumerators, and there had been harassment of the women surveyors as well. Also, there is the delay impact, that is the policies that we are running right now. The welfare policies, they must take into account the census or the demographics, but right now they are relying upon the 2011 data that was collected, and it is nearly about 15-year-old data or the figures that we are relying for the welfare politics. As well as the caste data, it will be collected for the first time after 1931. In 1931, there were a total of 4,147 of the castes that were recorded in India. And let's see how many castes will be recorded this time. Yes, first census was in 1872 under Lord Mayo, and regular after 1881. That was under Lord Ripon. That's true. All right, now coming to the next important news that we have for today, it is the Supreme Court calls for fund for young lawyers and flags that there had been brain drain in the legal profession. So Supreme Court have directed the creation of young lawyers professional assistance fund in every state and in every union territory. Now it has cited that there is the brain drain, and ultimately if financially struggling lawyer, he will quit the litigation, they will move towards the other, ultimately to the other profession and even to the other countries as well. Now, the fund that will be there, it will be under the control of jurisdictional high courts which are there, and even it could be the autonomous body through which the fund could be regulated. That is what the Supreme Court have said. And there should be the self-sustaining model where the beneficiaries, they must repay once it is stable. At the same time, when it comes to the petition, so it was the petition by the 6 women lawyers, and also flagged the lack of the ladies bar rooms that was laid down by the Supreme Court in this particular judgment. So again, this is very important because this is about the creation of the Young Lawyers Fund, and also it relates to the structural lapses where there are no ladies bar room that are there. Again, this is about the structure of the judiciary or the structural lapses which are there in the judiciary in India. All right, now coming to the next important news that we have, it is soon police may scan your fingerprints on the go, and this relates to the Abhigyan app that relates to, or it connects to the NAFIS that is there. So it had been launched by Union Home Minister Amit Shah, and it is developed by NCRB, that is the Crime Records Bureau that is there. Now over here, it links to the NAFIS, that is National Automated Fingerprint Identification System, where in the database there are total 1.3 crore criminal database, the suspects or the convicts, along with 9.91 lakh of the narcotics offenders which had been included in the complete database. Now the field officers, they may match the fingerprints in the 35 seconds of the time period on their smartphone using the app that is Abhigyan app. And also the legal basis is the Criminal Procedure Identification Act of 2022, through which the identification can be done and through which the fingerprints can be matched. However, there is very important thing that to note over here, that is Section 3 of the Identification Act of 2022. Now it says that there is mandatory biometrics only for the arrested or the convicted person. Now this act does not permit the random testing of the individual on the streets, and ultimately there are the civil liberties which had been concerned, because we have Article 21 that relates to the right to privacy, and ultimately this was the Supreme Court judgment, and ultimately this would infringe the right to privacy as well. So over here you can relate this to the right to privacy, that is the inferred right under Article 21. And the current system that we have, that there are only 1,556 workstations which are at police station. They can match the biometric data to the NAPIS. And the expansion to the smartphone, it will give the major boost to the surveillance capacity or the capability of the Indian police forces. So again, this is important. Now, coming to the next important news that we have in today's The Hindu, it is the three-language policy not viable. That had been said by the CBSE schools in Nagaland. Now, over here, when it comes to the complete issue that we are talking about, it is about the three-language policy and the Nagaland challenge that is there. Now, over here, what had happened was that there is the 19 CBSE schools in Nagaland which have written to the Education Minister Pradhan, and they have said that Nagaland has more than 17 major tribes and each have their own distinct language. Sagar, good morning. All right, they have their own distinct language that is there, and ultimately you can see over here that the NAPs, so it has said that there should be the three-language formula including Sanskrit that should be there right from the class 6th. Now, English serves as the practical lingua franca across the tribal communities that connects them to each other, but at the same time, the schools, they have been given just a 7-day compliance window, which is impractical. All right, which is impractical. That had been said by the schools which are there. All right, good morning, Ganesh. Now, over here, when it comes to the important thing is that the NEP 2020, it lays down that there should be three-language formula where at least 2 of the native Indian languages must be studied. The original three-language formula was drafted in 1968. All right, it was in 1968, which said that the 2 of the Indian languages should be there. And it was in 1968, the formula was basically, it was divided into 2 groups. It was about Hindi-speaking states and about non-Hindi states. All right. So what the formula was at that point of time was that in the Hindi-speaking states, there should be Hindi and English, and along with this, there should be one more language that should be the South Indian language. All right, it could be South Indian language or any other language that should be there, but preference was given to the South Indian language in this particular, the education policy that was there in 1968. And then when it comes to the non-Hindi states, over here, it was about, any language that is English. Now, along with English, it was Hindi and any other native language that could have been there, the third language that could be studied. So this was basically the formula that was given originally, and there is Article 360A that provides that there should be the instruction that should be relayed in the mother tongue. Yes. And ultimately over here, you can see that the 8th schedule, it provides that there are the 22 scheduled languages in India. But when it comes to Nagaland, the problem is none of the 22 languages which are under the 8th schedule, they are dominant in the state. As well as when it comes to the NBSE or Nagaland board that is there, they had earlier failed to implement the 2 language or the second language formula as well. So how the CBSE schools, they will implement the 3 language formula, that is a concern that is in front of the Nagaland right now. Now, the key issues over here is the Sanskrit is being studied by default. All right, we can see it in the Hindi speaking belt as well, that the Sanskrit is basically the third language that we study in the school. And ultimately, there is no feasible alternative that exists for the third language that should be studied over here. At the same time, when it comes to the discontinuity, so those students which are learning French, those students which are learning German, or they are learning Spanish, so there would be discontinuity of learning the language, and that is again a concern over here. Also, when it comes to the qualified Hindi and the Sanskrit teachers, they are unavailable in Nagaland because of the language barriers and even the cultural mission as compared to the compliance exercise. That is a major concern that you can see. Where when it comes to the third language, all right, when it comes to the third language, that is majorly for the cultural integration of those regions, that the complete India, it should be culturally integrated with each other. But at the same time, when it comes to the compliance, that is a force. So ultimately, the tension is that if I want to get integrated with the culture of the other parts of India. So that must come from inside. It should not be compliant, or it should not be, coerced upon a person. So there is a demand that there should be a flexible framework or the special linguistic exemption that should be provided when it comes to the 3-language formula that had been implemented by the CBSE. Now, coming to the next important news, you can see over here, this is about the 4 glacial lakes in Arunachal. They have expanded in a decade that had been said by the study. So this study had been conducted by Suhora Technologies, that is a geospatial firm located in Noida, and it had done the satellite assessment of the 5 lakes which are located in Tawang. Now over here, there is Magochu Basin. And the study says that in Magochu Basin, the 4 out of the 5 lakes which are there, they have expanded between 2016 to 2026. And there is Sanhapo Lake. Now, the Sanhapo Lake, here you can see that the area, it has increased from 78.07 hectares to 88.81 hectares. And that is just between 2019 to 2026. All right. And there had been nearly about 10 hectares of the area that have been expanded. Now, over here, it is very important that this pertains to the Gulf or the glacial lake outburst of flooding that happens. And here, the NDMA have classified these lakes as the high risk or very high risk. And we have seen in the Sikkim that there was a tragedy where the glacial lake outburst flood in the South Lonak Lake. It has killed dozens of the people, and there was Chungthang Dam that was destroyed because of the flooding. And this is the increased risk that we are talking about, that there will be more of the Gulf or the glacial lake outburst flood that will be there. And they are because of 2 important things, that is either because of the moraine dam failure or because of the avalanche. And ultimately what happens is that the complete lake, the water, it outbursts into the the sections which are there, and that kills lots of people and destroys the property as well. Now over here, the eastern Himalaya is where we will see that there had been acceleration of the glacial retreat because of the climate change. And ultimately the Center for Earth Sciences and Himalayan Studies, they have launched the prior risk evaluation that has triggered this complete study. Also, the satellites which had been used, they have used the multi-dimensional, arrays, or you can see the, the complete, the special, array system. We have the ICEI, that is ICE, as well as we have PlanetScope and the LIS 4 system that had been used, and they have the synthetic aperture radar. They have the multi-spectral array system as well. That there is the multi-dimensional assessment that has been done for these lakes. And the experts have said that the lake expansion is actually not the imminent threat for the flooding. But at the same time, there are multiple risk factors that apply that could lead to the glacial lake outburst flood. And again, that is a major concern in the northeast region. Now, over here, you can see that there had been moraine dammed lake. So they are retreating, and ultimately the retreating glacier that increases the water volume of these lakes. So there is more water volume if there is any, you can say destruction, any destruction to the damming, whether it is moraine dams, or it is actually the, the avalanche that sticks. So ultimately what happens is that the complete lake, it gets outburst. And that leads to heavy flooding into the lower riparian region, where the glacial lake, it actually floods everything that comes into its way. And there is also very important pitfall that is against the black soil as well as we have the red soil. Now the black soil is basically that absorbs the moisture. All right, it is the clayey soil that is there, and there is the red soil as well. So there is the pitfall between both the types of the soil, and ultimately the risk, it depends upon why the lake is growing, and actually not upon the type of the soil, because ultimately if the disaster, it will struck. All right, so this will be, or the damming that will get destroyed. All right, as well as when it comes to the complete disaster risk management that we have. So we have the NDMA, that is the National Disaster Management Authority, that had been, that had been placed, or you can say that is there, which is responsible for any kind of the disaster that strikes because of the Gulf. Now we are actually right now monitoring the improved, the monitoring had been improved after the Sikkim, 2023 GLOF, and right now we are monitoring all the lakes which are there in the eastern Himalayas, in the western Himalayas as well. And this is very important because ultimately when it comes to the gap, so the major gap is about the early warning system, so that, if there is any disaster that has to struck a region, so we must know about it beforehand so that ultimately we can save the lives and the property. And even if not property, the lives must be saved. And that we have seen when it comes to the cyclone monitoring. All right. In the cyclone monitoring in the past, 1 year, I have seen that the monitoring have improved, the early warning system have improved, which have led to nearly no deaths when the cyclone have hit India. So that is very, very important when it comes to prevention and the disaster management as well. Now, coming to the next important news, it is about MPC, and the MPC, or the Monetary Policy Committee. It has said that it is the West Asian impact that is there on the Indian economy, and ultimately that will stay right now. So the MPC have claimed that the West Asia conflict is the number one risk for India right now, and ultimately there had been the Strait of the Hormuz which have disrupted, and ultimately because of this, the disruption, what has happened is that there had been crude oil price rises, and at the also there had been the shipping costs which have risen. That is the major problem that when it comes to the economy right now, and thereby the MPC have maintained the repo rate at the same rate, that is 5.25, using the neutral stance. And right now the MPC or the RBI is just in the wait and watch kind of situation that we can see. All right, India have entered into the crisis from the position of relative strength. That was what the MPC have said. And also, along with this, you can connect this news to the another news where the World Bank have approved $1.5 billion to India for the structural reforms, that is for the job creation as well. Now, coming to the next important news, it is about the anti-migration law that has been passed by the European Union. And over here, what has happened is the EU Parliament, it has passed the return regulation on 17th June. And there were 418 votes that were for the bill, and there were 218 against it. Now, over here, what will happen is that this bill or this act, it will allow the member states of European Union to set up the offshore deportation centers in the non-European nation. Now, when there was a crisis in the Africa, all right, there were crises in Africa, and Africa, we have seen that there are lots of regions which are under the severe crisis belt, or there is the humanitarian crisis that I am talking about. Now, what has happened was that these people, they have crossed the north of Africa, and they crossed the Mediterranean Sea, and ultimately they started moving towards the European nation for the safe, environment. And that is when the European nations, they started moving against the migration. So ultimately, this is the anti-migration law that had been passed by the European Union, and this will allow the member states to set up the offshore deportation centers in non-European nation states, and ultimately the third countries, they must uphold the human rights and non-refoulement principle that had been stated by the law. Now, the maximum detention earlier, it was 6 months. Now, this has been raised to 2 years and unlimited for the security risk as well. And only 28% of the ordered deportations, they were actually executed. That is by the report that was transmitted by Eurostat. Now, over here, it is very important that there is the EU Pact on Migration and Asylum that was there in 2024, and it was effective since 12th of June 2026. Now, UK Rwanda model was the precedent, and now this had been abolished by the Starmer government, and even there was a precedent there where it is the Italy's Albania repatriation centers that were created. Now, this is partially similar, but actually this was blocked by the courts, the step that was taken by Italy. So over here, let me tell you what the complete scenario is. The complete scenario is that if there is a person who actually gets into the European Union, so a person, he approaches the European Union or the nations which are there, and ultimately he asks for asylum. All right, what he asks for? He asks for asylum. If he has been given the asylum, it's okay. All right, if he has been given the asylum, he can stay in the European Union state. So if he is given the asylum, so he stays. But at the same time, if he is not given the asylum, what will happen? If he is not given the asylum, so in that condition, he will be deported. He will be deported back, or he will be deported to these deportation states, which were or the deportation centers that will be created in the non-EU nations that will be there. All right, and ultimately over here, this is what you can see, that it is the surge of the far right, where the European People's Party, it has aligned with the European conservatives and the reformists, the patriots for the Euro bloc, and that has led to the passage of this right. There is also 6 lakh asylum application in EU that you can see in 2025, and they are now down 27% from the 2024 applications. So it is very important that there is non-refoulement that had been spoken about in this act, which is basically no deportation to the country where a person faces the persecution. So that is non-refoulement, that a person will not be deported to that country where he faces the persecution. There is reform regulation as compared to the Asylum Pact, where there are the complementary instruments, and ultimately a person who is seeking asylum into the another country, they must go through the Asylum Pact or the regulation, the return regulation that is there. Also, there are irregular migrants as compared to the asylum seekers. So there is a distinction, legal distinction, where it comes to the illegal migrants, they migrate without the proper seeking of the asylum status, or they migrate without any kind of the legal backing that is there. But when it comes to the asylum seekers, they are basically seeking a proper residence into the another states. And this is very important because ultimately the Human Rights Watch have said that the passage of this act is basically narrowly punitive approach that has been taken by the European Union. All right, the next important news that you can find in our today's The Hindu, it is about Tamil Nadu House that has unanimously opposed the Karnataka government's Mekadatu dam proposal. So there is the complete video that you can see in the video section that relates to the whole of issue. All right, that is the Mekadatu Dam and how it will impact Karnataka and Tamil Nadu as well. So you can see this video over the complete video section that is there, where I have explained the complete thing. Now coming to your prelims 2027, there are certain news that relates to this. Like for example, the Pakistan has been said, or it has been, it was said by India that it is a Frankenstein state at the UN. Now what is Frankenstein state? When it comes to the Frankenstein state, it is a geopolitical metaphor that is being used to describe a country that is basically creating, nurturing and enabling the forces, often militant and the extremist groups, that ultimately or eventually spiral out of the control and then threaten the creator's own existence. That is what Frankenstein state here it means. Now, Frankenstein basically was a novel that was written by Mary Shelley, and ultimately that was the novel that was published in 1818. Now, over here in this novel, what happens is a person creates another, creature. And that creature, then it gets out of the control and then it, consume, or it actually destroy the original or the originator itself. And that is why, or that is from where the term had been derived, or it had been taken from the novel Frankenstein. Now coming to the next important news, it is that sickle cell anemia, it has to be eradicated by 2047. That was said by our president, that is President Murmu. And here, when it comes to sickle cell anemia, basically what happens is it is a severe and inherited blood disorder that is there, and there is a genetic mutation. And due to this genetic mutation, what happens is that there are RBCs, or the red blood cell, they are actually circular. But the RBCs, they change their shape and ultimately they become rigid, sticky and crescent shape. And thereby, because they become rigid and sticky and they are crescent shape, they do not flow through the blood vessel properly. And ultimately, these abnormal cells, they get stuck into the blood vessel, which blocks the oxygen supply or the oxygen flow to the body. And ultimately, that leads to intense pain and even chronic fatigue and the serious organ damage as well. And that is what sickle cell anemia is all about. Now, there is another important news that relates to the FATF, that is Cultural Secretary Vivek Agarwal is the new FATF Vice President. Now, when it comes to FATF, it is a Financial Action Task Force. This is the intergovernmental, policy making body that was established by G7 in 1989 to protect the global complete financial systems which are there. Now, over here, its primary purpose is to set the policies or the standards in the international regime that prevent the money laundering, that prevents the terrorist financing, and also the proliferation of the weapons of mass destruction. And please remember over here, this is very important, that when it comes to the FATF, it is actually not an investigating agency, all right, and also does not have the power to arrest or the seizing of the funds. All right, the next important news that you can see is about Geo. That is filed DRHP. Now, what is DRHP? It is draft red herring prospectus. Now, over here, DRHP is the first step where any company that wants to launch the IPO, if any company wants to launch the IPO, this is the first process that the company has to file. Now, this IPO, it is the size that can reach up to 40,000 crore rupees, and ultimately that would be the biggest IPO when we are talking about the complete scenario. Now, what is the IPO? IPO is initial public offering. All right, that is the first time that a company is offering its share to the market, and ultimately then afterwards it gets traded on the stock exchange, that is NSE or BSE, that is there in our country. All right, so these are the important news that you can find in our today's session. But at the same time, let me tell you that we have the GS Foundation batch as well, where you get a detailed foundation batch and detailed concept clearing in the complete scenario, and you can join the batch because it is starting from 22nd of June. Now, coming to the next important thing that we discussed, that is the questions and answers. All right. So here we have the question for your prelims, and it is, first question is, with reference to section 69A of the Information Technology Act 2000, consider the following statements. The first one is, it empowers both the central and the state governments to issue the direction to block the public access to online information. The definition of the information under the IT Act is broad enough to encompass software application and computer programs. Then the procedural rules under this section require a designated committee to conduct a hearing before a final blocking order is confirmed. So, which of the statement given above are correct? Let's see. So, let's see what will be the right answer for this question that is on your screen, and let's see what should be the correct answer. Reshma is saying, okay, Reshma, good morning. All right. Now, Reshma is saying 1. All right. It empowers both the central and the state government to issue the direction to block public access to online information. Beta, this is incorrect. All right. There is no empowerment of the state. All right. States are not empowered. It is basically the Information Technology Act of 2000. When it comes to the IT is under the union government. All right. So, ultimately, it is not the first statement that is correct, but the second and third are correct. All right, so second and third are correct, and the first one is incorrect. Right, so answer will be B, not A. All right. Okay. Now, coming to the next one. Consider the following pairs of rivers and tributaries. The first one is Arkhavati, and pair is Kaveri. Then we have Kabini, Krishna, and Amravati Kaveri. So, over here it says which of the pairs given above are correctly matched. Third statement is correct. There is a preliminary, inquiry that gets there. When it comes to the telegram as well. In the telegram also, the telegram was actually told about the process or the things that are there. And there is a preliminary or the, designated committee that conducts the hearing before the final blocking order is confirmed. That is true. It is a procedural norm that is followed. All right. So over here, what will be the right answer for the second question that we have for the tributaries? We have Arkhavati, Kaveri, we have Kabini, Krishna, and Amravati Kaveri. So the right answer here is, again, when it comes to Kabini, Kabini is also the tributary of Kaveri and not of Krishna. So here we have B, that is 1 and 3 only, that will be the correct. Yes. All right, all the 3 are tributaries of Kaveri River. Now, coming to the next question, we have with reference to the Criminal Procedure Identification Act 2022, consider following statements. Over here, we have it completely repealed the colonial era Identification of Prisoner Act 1920. It mandates that biological samples can be taken from any arrested person regardless of the nature of offense. Third, the NCRB or the National Crime Records Bureau is the nodal agency designated to collect and preserve physical and biological measurements. So which of the pair or which of the things will be correct from above? Let's see. So what will the right answer? I am getting 2 and 3. I am getting B as well, C as well. So here it is actually all the statements are true. All right. It completely repealed the Colonial Era Identification Act that was there. Then mandates the biological samples to be taken or it can be taken. And also the NCRB is the nodal agency designated to collect and preserve the physical and biological measurement. So that is true. We have 1, 2 and 3. It will be D. All right. Now coming to the next question that we have. Consider the following statements regarding the 10th schedule of the Constitution of India. First, the 91st Constitutional Amendment Act 2003 removed the protection for splits under the paragraph 3. A merger under paragraph 4 is legally valid only if at least 2/3 of the members of the original political party's legislative group agree to it. And then third, once a legislator defects, they are immediately disqualified from voting or participating in House proceedings before the Speaker's formal order. So, which of the statement given above are true? Let's see. Good morning, Rishi. Let's see what will be the right answer here. This is the next question that we have in front of us, question number 4. And here, what will be the right answer? The 91st Amendment Act, yes, of course, it has done with the split. The merger under the paragraph 4, it is legally valid. But if the legislator defects, they are not immediately defied. All right, they are disqualified only after the formal order, and thereby the third statement is incorrect. So that is, we have A, that is 1 and 2. That will be the correct answer. Now coming to the next one, the Magochu Basin and the Sanhapo Glacial Lake, recently highlighted due to Gulf risk, are located in which of the following regions? So this is very easy. All right. So what will be the right answer here? Ladakh, Sikkim, or Arunachal Pradesh or Himachal Pradesh. So we have already discussed that this is in Arunachal Pradesh. And then we have these questions that you can practice for your mains examination as well. We have the first question, the Supreme Court's declaration of the right to walk as a fundamental right while constitutionally sound will remain toothless without legislative backing and urban infrastructure investment critically examined. All right, then we have the NEET UG 2026 crisis exposes systemic failures in India's examination governance, evaluate the adequacy of existing institutional mechanism and suggest reforms. And then India's clean energy transition faces a transmission bottleneck, not a generation shortage. Discuss the solutions available and the policy shifts needed to unlock 1000 gigawatt of renewable energy. So these are the questions that you can try for your mains examination. And that sums up the complete The Hindu analysis, the important articles, and even the questions that we have seen. Now, let me tell you that on StudyIQ, we have the GS Foundation batches. We have P2I batch, and for English, we have the resolution batch. You can join the resolution batch. The batch will be starting from 22nd of June. All right, so these batches are starting on 22nd of June. You can enroll into this, and these batches are structured upon the model that is the SMART. Now, over here, the SMART lays down that there is the complete structured classes. We have the mentorship, we have the assessment, the revision, and the test series as well. And for the maximum discount, you can use the code that is BRS Live so that ultimately you will get the maximum discount on the platform. Now, also, if there is any problem while enrolling into the batch, you can call us on 76400300 as well. So that would be all in this session. Thank you very much, guys. And thank you, Shinobi. Thank you, Apex. Yes, see you soon. And Political Science, thank you. Nairaji, thank you. Isha, thank you. Rajneesh, thank you. Thank you very much. Rishi, thank you. So that would be all in this session. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. I will see you not tomorrow. Tomorrow is Sunday. So I will see you on Monday at the same time, that is at 9:30 a.m. and we will be doing the complete Hindu analysis on Monday itself. All right, so that would be all. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Do not forget to like the session, do comment as well as share this session with your friends and subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed it yet. So bye-bye. Take care and Jai Hind. Thank you.